something dawned on me at the last conference that the words I'd never really associated before, or maybe focused on before around adventure. And that was the word freedom. And I was like, God, it is an expression of freedom, adventuring. And maybe that's obvious to many of you, but I hadn't really realised how it's so very important for our sense of freedom and maybe how we free ourselves in the rest of our lives through adventuring. And also, very connected to that is autonomy and play. The idea of play, I think adventures are the way that we adults play. And I definitely know that for me, it's how I play. And so we have a wonderful expert now, Anita Grant, who is expert in lots of areas, but has a very deep and long experience of running adventure playgrounds and really engaging in that area and the importance of adventurous play for children and also for adults, because we all have an inner child. I like to call myself, but I can't remember the words now. I'm not childish, I'm childlike. And I think that's an element that we need to hold on to. It's a great part of play and freedom and authenticity in our lives. So, Anita, thank you so much for coming. It's going to be a great half an hour, just over half an hour, and then some questions. Here is Anita Grant.
Thank you. Right, thank you very much. So yeah, I'm here. I was wondering today, people were asking me as we were wandering about and having chats, so what do you do? And I kept thinking, I don't really want to tell you what I do, because then it sounds a bit like, why are you here? So I wanted to talk a bit about what I have done before I get to what I do. I would call myself a reverse adventurer based on some of the conversations we've had today. There's been a sort of quality of the way people have spoken to us about maybe having difficulties in their lives or having certain types of jobs or being in corporates and then moving into a space of adventure and freedom and autonomy and going through experiences that have changed them, transitions, all of these amazing words we've heard. And I would suggest that I'm like going the other way from you. So I've put some facts about me here. And as you can see at the top, I'm actually now a chief officer at Sussex Police Force. So I've literally gone from running adventure playgrounds, I was also a Sure Start programme manager for 5 years, to joining the police. And nobody can understand why I've done that. I'm trying to still understand why I've done that, but today, a lot of things really resonated with me as people spoke about things in their childhood that they were still maybe going through or grieving for. People have spoken about the need for structure, the need to put themselves in a place of belonging. So lots of these themes have really been resonating with me through the day about where I'm up to. So I'm going to talk to you today about the actual adventure playgrounds. I'm going to give you a little bit of history, a little bit of background, because I attended an adventure playground myself as a child, and it was really, really important to me. So when I think back to being that mixed-race child living in Camden Town in the 70s, there was a lot of difficulty in my family life. There was addiction and mental health issues. And I just noticed that the timer isn't on. So I'm going to be completely lost, rambling on to you, sorry. There was difficulty in my childhood so that the adventure playground, which was walking distance from my home, became incredibly important to me. And it was a place where I felt safe, which is very different from the way that lots of people experience adventure playgrounds, especially when they are the parents of children going to adventure playgrounds, where safe is not the word they think. So, as you can see, I ran the Adventure Playground charity for 15 years, and I also have got 3 children who all attended the adventure playgrounds until they just said, "No, no, please, can we just go to some police things instead?" No, they didn't really. They had a lot of freedom and autonomy, and I used to talk a lot with people about whether you could be a play worker as a parent. And I think that was a really interesting conversation, because play workers who were trained would think a lot about how they would want to support and facilitate children in a way that they didn't feel comfortable with their own children. But for me, play worker meant being playful, being brave, being able to facilitate choice. So choice is a really, really important word when we're talking about adventure playgrounds. So I'm going to actually talk about adventure playgrounds now. So adventure playgrounds started with an idea which was called junk playgrounds, and they arrived here after the Second World War. So lots of children would find bomb sites and areas, spaces where adults weren't going, I guess, and they would go and create their own play. Oh, I don't even know what to call that. Play things what adults don't like, basically. And so that was happening across Europe, just using rubbish, just using rubble, just using what they could find. The adults were very distracted with getting home for the war, so children had a lot of freedom. And someone called Lady Allen of Hertwood visited Denmark and found this play space. And she was very, very inspired by that. The original one that she looked at was called Emdrup, designed by an architect, Carl Sorensen. So he had worked with the children in order to sort of create the spaces and the climbing frames and the tire swings and all of those things that the children said they wanted. So this wasn't a totally child-built environment, but it was very much with people who wanted to explore what the children wanted to do. It's very much about testing yourself, using your imagination, and obviously it's not all about the equipment, so there will be a lot of space and time for people to interact with each other and get a bit of freedom from what was a really difficult space for children after the Second World War. So this is another picture of how those sorts of playgrounds are developing in Europe. And I think what I was going to talk about was the importance of choice, which I did just mention. Adventures happen for children when they get to choose. Choose is so important, because as adults, we're often trying to support children to learn certain skills, support them to become socialized. Even those of us who might be stepping outside of the sort of corporate world still often have an idea of how we want our children to behave. How we don't like it if our children don't queue nicely for the slide, or push another child out of the way on their way to do something. And it's really important for all of us to explore that within ourselves, right? Because if you take your child to Adventure Playground and they push all the children out of the way and go on the slide first, your sense might be that you want to stop them doing that, or you need to go and intervene. But that will be about your personal feelings about the situation. It's not actually anything to do with what's going on for that child, or indeed the children that they pushed in front of. And it's really important for that sort of freedom to happen for children, for them to be able to work out what's possible, who they are in a group, how they have friends, how they don't have friends, whether people are going to let you join in or not. These are the things they need to learn. And at the current times, with the way that children are so restricted in their free play, I wonder how they're going to work these things out. Because if we're not telling them, TikTok's telling them, other grown-ups are telling them, and there's very little freedom for them. So this is Lady Allen of Hertwood, and she was very brave, and she came back to England with having seen all of these amazing playgrounds, and she decided she wanted to set one up and managed to argue for the risk and the health and safety and the risk, and did set up lots of adventure playgrounds. And even when I was running adventure playgrounds, so I ran them in Islington. We ran 6 adventure playgrounds from 2006 till whatever 16 years after that is, which is like soon. I was always arguing with the council, with parents, with various others about health and safety. There was a constant issue about whether it was safe, because an adventure playground will have all the elements within it. Children will be able to have fires, play with water, climb heights, and use tools. So we would have saws and nails and hammers, and I ran those playgrounds for 16 years, and I can tell you we had the most injuries we had I could count on one hand, and no serious injuries in terms of people using hammers and tools. We did have a few broken arms from falls and things like that, but actually those sorts of impacts on children are nothing compared to what happens to them in rugby or cricket or any of these other very regulated type of activities. So this was the other thing I wanted to say about adventure playgrounds, is that they don't necessarily look like how grown-ups want them to look. So when children decide how they want to play, they just do it their own way. And I saw so many times where people would want to go and tidy this up. Like, oh, but you haven't really put it on properly. And especially when you're working with younger children. So I was also a Sure Start program manager. So Sure Start was this amazing thing that seems far in the past, like magic, where a lot of money and resources and time and effort was focused on children under 5 and their families. And it was a real privilege that I was there. I ran a first wave one in Hackney, and it was, an amazing time. And so there was a lot of thinking about what makes a difference to children and families who are living in really difficult circumstances. And the sense of freedom, autonomy, the words that Belinda used, needed for children living in difficulty, it's even more freeing if they manage to be able to do that. I'm completely lost with my notes now. Right, so after that's not mine, is it? After the Sure Start programme, and I went to run Islington Play Association. It was a support organisation, an umbrella organisation that supported other play providers. But in 2010, when the coalition government came in, they took the word play out of every single document that they had. So everything that had happened and had been able to be called play could no longer be called play. So we were trying to work out how to maintain the adventure playgrounds. And a lot of adventure playgrounds have closed, but Islington has still got 11 adventure playgrounds. So this is Lumpy Hill Adventure Playground. This is a photo I took in around 2010. And I wanted to show it to you because of its similarity to the picture of, post-war Denmark. Adventure playgrounds have not changed that much. And of course, children have not changed that much. So we worked, as I said, we fought a lot of battles and had to have a lot of conversations with people. The other thing you'll see in this adventure playground is that there's no grown-ups. So our adventure playgrounds would have 3 play workers on. We could have up to 120 children on this site, and no adults, parents were allowed on the site. So grown-ups had to leave their children at the gate, and the children could come in, and the children could leave if they wanted to. So when we would be negotiating with the council and talking about being funded, they wanted the children to be registered and how long were they going to be there, and we would just not be able to tell them, because the children would only be there if they wanted to be there. Because a really core part of adventure play is the freedom, not only to choose what you're doing, but to choose whether to do it at all. So if children wanted to choose to leave, they'd leave. And from age 8 and up, they could leave. As time went on, we did have to start to change that a little bit and ring parents if children wanted to leave, because they started to get really anxious And it was I saw a big difference in those 10 years of how people treated their children in terms of the freedom that they would give them. So we did a bit of a sort of survey of people to find out what was important about the adventure playgrounds for them. And the biggest thing that we thought was interesting about this was that the word most used was no, not playground or freedom. Sorry, I'm on your way. It was no. And that was about in terms of them getting to know friends, getting to know their neighbours, getting to know how to do things. And it was so interesting that that was the word that came out of the freedom that people had in adventure playgrounds. So lots of other people have thought about adventure play. This is a quote from Peter Gray, who is currently working, an academic in America. And he talks about what happens when children don't get to play a lot in terms of thinking about the opposite of it. But this is where he's talking about what he thinks adventure play is. And we talk a lot about that, taking risks. Professor Helen Dodd has talked a lot about risky play. And the point that really links into lots of the other ways that people have spoken about adventure here today, in terms of putting yourself out of your comfort zone, stretching yourself, and actually taking risks that feel a bit scary, but afterwards feel amazing when you've got through that. This is just a reference to Ellen Sandseter, who's an academic from Norway, because she talks about scary, funny play and talks a lot about how mammals play and the need to manage your fear and overcome it by trying things out. And one of the things that she really talks about, which I recognise from my time with adventure play, is about rough and tumble play, and where children might actually experience anger, might actually experience frustration, but within play is a safe way to think about those sorts of emotions and thoughts. So that's why, that might be one of the reasons why play is so important. And I think the other part of that is that children can lash out and fall out and do things that feel like they are going to cause big consequences. But within play, in a play space, if you facilitate that, they can work that through. And those are such important lessons, right, for all of us to be able to take with us going forward. So this is a quote from Bob Hughes. Bob Hughes has done a lot to support play and how people are able to talk about play. He created a lot of different ways of using language to understand what he observed children doing. Lost my notes again. This is a picture of the really, really exciting, inspiring play space which I went to, which was my adventure playground that I just talked to you about, which I started to go to when I was 7. And I know that doesn't look that exciting, right? But that was so important to me as a child, to go from my house, which was at the top of that park, and to be able to go there by myself was so important. And I remember many things that I did there that gave me that real thrill of fear and excitement. They had a very tall swing, and I remember once on a bonfire night, I went on the swing in the middle of, it felt like the middle of the night. To me, it was probably like 6 p.m. Climbed up and swung on this really high swing, and I can literally feel, as I'm talking to you, the wind rushing through my hair, and how scared I was that maybe I was going to die once I jumped off this thing. And then the sense of strength and confidence that I had that I'd done that. And these are the small adventures, you know, the moments that you carry with you that can be created in lots of different ways for children and adults. You know, we can all put ourselves into those difficult spaces, as I know because I've gone to the police. And I feel that sense of fear and anxiety quite often in my work when I'm working with them. So yeah, that's just a picture of Woodland Tribe. So Woodland Tribe are a really great organisation that go around and will just pop up these amazing play spaces very much focusing on what children can build themselves. Within a couple of days, they'll go to festivals and places like that, and be able to allow this sort of building and children creating the skills that they will need for those things. You can't imagine, or I am sure you can actually, children's faces if you give them some wooden nails and a hammer. They can't believe it. They know they're not supposed to have that thing, right? And it's just wonderful to see what they do. And they never chase each other around with a hammer or threaten each other or do any of them things, never ever. They just build things. So part of another role I have, which is the chair of Play England, I've been doing that for about 6 years now. And through COVID, we actually got very involved in doing some campaigning with local authorities and the government, really, because so many playgrounds were closed. So COVID, for me, is such a brilliant example of how adults can restrict children. It was just almost perfect. The decision was made that playgrounds were dangerous, and so they were locked, closed. Children weren't allowed. You remember, there was actually a whole conversation we had to have about whether children's play was exercise. And children had to pretend to exercise to be allowed to go out of their house. Like, I'm saying it to you and I'm thinking, hold on. Can that have actually happened? And of course, the serious side of that is that happened to children. So those children who were locked inside their houses for like nearly a year are growing up now. And so for all of us, we're going to come across people who have had very, very different life experiences from us. And then we start to move towards the idea of the adventure therapy, the therapeutic adventure that we've been talking about in different ways, because I think we are going to really need to think about that for our young people, no matter what age they were or development stage they were, where they lost a year that we all had. They're going to be thinking very differently, but it's a positive thing, because we know if you let them loose in a space where they have freedom and access to nature, they will recover very, very quickly. And we found that after COVID, when we were able to reopen the adventure playgrounds. I mean, we had the adventure playgrounds open the entire time. We reclassified them as not adventure playgrounds, just as open spaces, so that we could cheekily let children into them. And we only had to close for one of the lockdowns. But what we did find after the lockdowns was that even those children that had been so restricted, who were really scared to come, who were scared of other humans, they hadn't been allowed to play with other children, it would take them a couple of hours tops to be running around straight away, because humans are amazing recovery animals, right? They will just be able to sort it out. So it is really positive. Freedom, adventure. So Bob Hughes also wrote the Playwork Principles. So I'm just flashing these up. I'm sure the slides can be available for you. Trying to understand what that play thing is and explain that it's a fundamental need, as well as his theory was that the human animal would be developing the neural networks and the brain, the ways of the brain working that was specifically appropriate for the life that they were entering into. So the need to interact with your environment, the need to interact with nature, the need to interact with the other humans around you are what's building who you are and how you're going to manage. And that underpins all the adventure play theory. So, oh no, I've lost that one. This is somebody who you can Google, because I've completely lost my notes. Who said this interesting thing. But the reason why I've put that is because it has, other people have been talking about some of this, right? When you were talking, Israel, about your experience of rites of passage, that sense of exaltation, that sense of being so connected with what's around you, I guess, and being in the flow, which was also mentioned earlier. this is all the way that play is described by people who've been studying it. So this is the play types. I just mentioned this because I just wanted to point out a couple of these to you. So Bob Hughes had developed these play types to try and, through his observations, sort of divide up what the different things that children do when they play and what they might mean. And the ones that are really interesting to me is deep play. So deep play is play which allows the child to encounter risky or even potentially life-threatening experiences to develop survival skills and conquer fear. And, you know, whilst I wasn't in a life-threatening experience going on that big rope swing in the middle of the night, it felt like I mean, maybe I was. It felt like I was. And I think that's a description of what he was trying to explain with that idea of that one. And then the other one I was going to point out is mastery play, which is control of the physical and affective ingredients of the environments. So that's like making a dam in a stream, building a bonfire, digging holes in earth and sand. So all of these different types of play he sort of observed them in children, and then play workers will learn about them and think about them. And recapitulative play. Play that allows the child to explore ancestry, history, rituals, stories, rhymes, fire and darkness, enables children to access the play of earlier human evolutionary stages. And I think that's really interesting, right? So that really links into our sense of being hunters and gatherers, or, you know, the sort of the ways that children, when you give them the freedom to work things out, are literally, they've literally got everything within them, in their brains. So I wanted to just end with this, because this is from the Health and Safety Executive, reproduced by them in 2021. And part of the work that we do with Play England is discussing with adults how important it is for children to have the freedom to play. And actually, we talk a lot about risk-benefit assessments. So instead of just risk assessments, you have to also bring in the benefits when you're making those assessments, and how important that is. And we were very proud when we helped the Health and Safety Executive create this statement. And it really has, you know, it really does make a difference when you are arguing with various different organisations or thinking about funding, that this is a statement that exists on their website. Some of the people that hate this statement the most are schools, because it's really difficult to run a school, and it would be easier if children didn't do annoying things. But of course, people like me and others are constantly arguing that they should be able to do annoying things. So I guess I was just going to say that I do see myself as an adventurer, even though it might be a reverse adventurer. That is not one of my slides, so that's a bit too much adventure for me. I guess I just wanted to talk finish on my move to the police force. It's definitely out of my comfort zone. It's definitely stretching me. I wanted to really get to the heart of a lot of different things that I wanted to talk about and think about. And I went directly from running a children's charity in London, running adventure playgrounds and a children's centre, to becoming a chief officer in Sussex Police. So it was a massive transition and a full-on out of the frying pan into the fire thing. But I'm still really enjoying it and seeing what I can do with my environment, how I can play with the other kids, and seeing what's going to happen next. So yeah, any questions?
Thank you very much for that. I'm just curious as to how plausible it is to set things like that up on a smaller scale. Because I think we've got one in Wigan right now, and it runs similar. The kids can come in and out as they desire, but it's in a particularly deprived area, and we have nothing else like it across Wigan. So I'm wondering how small a scale can we actually go with something like this without it turning into a thing that needs loads of money and loads of buy-in from different people around to get it set up.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's, the core principles, which are creating a space for children to be able to have a lot of choice of what they do, can be incorporated in all sorts of spaces, right? So there's been primary schools that have created that you can bring, that people have brought things in, and then in playtime in the playground, children are able to move things about, build things, have junk really in the playground. Some schools are able to do that. But so it's much more about the attitude, if you like, of the grown-ups who are with the children, which of course is not about resources. It is best if they can have a fire, but I know that's that makes people worry about their insurance, but it can be done.
Me again. It's a bit of a practical question. So I grew up in the arse end of Cambridgeshire in the 80s, and there used to be bits of the park that no one touched, and there was a picture reminiscent of, it was almost like, I don't know, some kind of like wooden structure, almost like an inverted triangle type thing, and it was always left and no one ever touched it. And I've got a 4-year-old now, and the exact same thing happens. So I was like, if there's a pirate ship or something that they get, they know how to play with it. If I give my daughter a box, she can make 1,000 things of it. But I see it time and time again in parks and playgrounds where someone has put something a little bit abstract, obscure, and the imaginative play still doesn't get them there, and they're kind of like, and I don't want to be the person who steps in and goes, go and use that big structure because someone's put it there for a reason. Like, what advice would you give as to how you can get people to use these things? Because they're obviously there for a purpose. It's a shame that they're not being utilised.
Well, it is really interesting, isn't it? Because I was talking earlier with somebody about the need to belong, the sense that you only want to do what the other people are doing. And I do wonder whether we're going to need to fight what happened in COVID a little bit more with some of our younger children. We were talking, I think, about the experiment where some people were on a tube train and alarm went off. Everybody's part of the experiment except one person. And because nobody responds to the alarm, that one person just sits there and doesn't do what they want to do, right? So with your child or any children, how are we going to encourage them to be wanting to step out of what the norms are or what the other children are doing or what they've done before? And it's a really interesting question to think about that and how you can model that. But when you say you don't want to be the person that says, go and play with that, why not?
Well, that was interesting, because I tend to be the mum who does daft stuff, and that's fine, but it's almost like, if parents do not be in the playground and given that space, am I encroaching on something naturally? It's a weird situation.
You can't encroach on something. You're the mum. You'd be confident. You're an amazing mum who wants your child to go and play in a different area from everyone else. That's a brilliant thing. Don't feel like that's a mistake.
It's not really a question, it's more of a comment, really. Congratulations on your posting to Sussex Police. I was a police officer for 30 years. So what you're doing now is probably not dissimilar to what you were doing as an adventure playgrounds, working in the police. That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
I guess it's linked to your work in the police. There seems to be a bit of a gap for older young people who don't seem to have an outdoor space where they're allowed to be, and especially young women, because they feel they're not really old, they're too old to be allowed in the playground, but there's women there, so they feel safe. I don't know, is there any work happening in that area to try and provide spaces for older young people where they can play in a different way.
It's really difficult, and it does start to be, people do start talking about resources and youth clubs and nobody's got any money and all of those things. There's some amazing charities. There's one called Make Space for Girls who do a lot of work.
I was reading their research.
So they do a lot of research, and also work with local authorities. But I guess it is all about the mindset, isn't it? It's about the mindset of the adults that think that they want to tell those young people how to behave. And part of my work in the police is thinking about how do we respond if we get a call, an ASB call, saying there's a group of kids in the park. That's how are the police going to respond to that? So there's lots of different ways of working with schools or even in communities who do call in constantly about not liking to see a group of 16-year-old boys close to each other in a space. There's enough work for all of us to do in all the different bits of the community that we have contact with to try and talk about that situation and address the fear that people feel when they see that. They never think, oh, that's what I used to do when I was 16, do they? Nobody ever thinks that.
Have you got any advice for us as youth workers, how we can better, I suppose, support young people? It's nice, I'm really glad that you're from the police side, you're starting to think about it, because I do think it's quite heavy-handed, isn't it, the way it's sort of dealt with at the moment. I guess, have you got any advice for us, how can we support that better, I suppose?
In terms of working with the authorities?
Working with young people or working with the authorities, can we better, I suppose, showcase what, I don't know, they're not that bad, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
They're just hanging out.
They're just like humans?
Yeah.
Weird. I think the big thing for them is to talk to them and all of the amazing things that have been discussed in terms of rites of passage and, adventure play and coming out their comfort zone and all the amazing work that you're doing is really important. And children and young people, I don't understand that. I can't imagine living in the world of TikTok at that age would just do my head in. But so, being there, listening is the big thing, right? But then, I think it's really important for people who do work with young people to be advocates for them with the police, with the school, with the community, and that means maybe putting yourself out of your comfort zone and going to local community meetings or, going to your local counsellor's surgery or all of those sorts of things that often we try and avoid. But if you're going as an advocate for the young people who you know in your area, then it's really worthwhile, isn't it? Because you're a grown-up.
Really? Oh, God. Thank you. That's really great.
Okay. Oh.
Hi. Play is very much thought of as something related to children and childhood. I work a lot in burnout, and one of the things that I'm seeing very commonly is in people who are burning out, this complete disconnection from the childhood self, and from the ability to play. Disconnection from the things that make us innately human, related to our childhood. And one of the things that I do is teach adults to play and to reconnect with the child that is in all of us. What's your view in working with adults in such an adult perceived area, and coming from a very childhood perceived area that is play, of the role that play has in mental health in adults?
Well, I think, it's very much what we've been talking about all day, isn't it? The adventure. What is that adventure? What does that mean? What is that stretch zone? How do we come out of our comfort zone? How do we think about putting ourselves in, exploring things that seem risky? How do we face the fear? All of those sorts of things. And that's what stops adults, along with the sense of needing to belong, be part of the group, not be ostracized. There's a lot of reasons why it's difficult to play as an adult. But I guess for me, I spoke to you about deep play and mastery play, and play is a very deep thing for me. It's not just about sort of being happy. In fact, it often isn't happy, some of the play that goes on. And definitely the discussions I have in the police aren't all that happy, but they are about those same real core things about not being kept in a box, not putting yourself in such a stressful situation that you get to a burnout situation. You know, really noticing how you're feeling and what's happening, and knowing that there are options, seeking out autonomy, seeking out freedom, seeking out space where you feel like there's choice, because there is always choice. And those are like the real deep themes in play that I think adults can think about.
Hello, thank you for that. I suppose this is more of a thought, but I think creating safe spaces for young individuals is so spoken about, and I think part of the reason why parents are more inclined for a child to stay indoors, like on a tablet or something like that, is because it looks safe. But actually, I think it would be interesting if there's some research into what effect that is having on mental health, because that's incredibly dangerous, almost more dangerous than something you see that's dangerous. You know, I suppose it's like redefining that, what you determine as dangerous. I wonder if there is any research on that, and what your thoughts are maybe on that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's really early days, isn't it? And as children are getting to have that connection with screens much earlier, we're not even managing to keep up with it, how quickly that's all happening. And I think you're right, the risk online is very high, right? Because grown-ups often, adult parents often don't have any idea what their children are doing. And actually the way that lots of the things are set up online is that they lead you to other places, and unless you're able to check yourself and where you go, it's the same, really, isn't it, of going out into the street and wandering about. It's just that we don't think about it like that. But the sorts of skills that we would give our children in order to enable them to do that, because as I explained with the adventure playgrounds, we wanted children actually from age 8 and up to be wandering around the streets. People don't really like that anymore, but that was okay. But the sorts of skills that you'd give children for that are the same skills that we need to give them so that they can be safe online, about checking where they are, knowing what spaces are safe, being aware for themselves when things don't feel right, being able to make good decisions, being able to understand things, being able to check facts. All of those things are actually the same skills. So whilst I have had moments where I'm freaking out, and when you work for the police, you know a lot of bad stuff. I also feel really, really confident that adventure play and the core themes within play are the ways that we will build the strength in the children to cope with what they're going to have to cope with. Thank you.